Marta from the Union of European Federalist Secretariats, and I'll be moderating today's event on a topic that is at the core of our federalist thinking, as it's the reform of the European Electoral Law. As federalists, you might have heard that we believe that transnational lists and parties would strongly contribute to deepening the integration of Europe and creating a true European public sphere. And therefore, we believe that they have to be part of the future of Europe. We have organized this event in the framework of the ongoing discussions in the AFCO committee on the draft report of the reform of the European Electoral Law. And today we will be namely discussing the union-wide electoral constituency in this proposal, in this draft report. For that, we have 6 excellent speakers. We have 3 current MEPs, 2 former MEPs, and a researcher from the EPRS. I will give the floor in the first place. I will be introducing them briefly before each of them speaks, but I would like to give the floor first to Mr. Ruiz de Besa. We are still waiting for some speakers. We'll be joining a bit later. Ruiz de Besa is the Vice President of the Union of European Federalists. He's a member of the European Parliament and the S&D spokesperson in the Committee on Constitutional Affairs. And during this term, during this mandate, he's the European Parliament rapporteur on the reform of the European Electoral Law. So, Domenic, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Alejandra, for the kind introduction, and of course, thank you to the other participants in the to the other participants in the event. Andrew Duff, Maria Diaz-Crego, and we're still waiting for Sandro Gozzi, Danuta Hubner, and Jolainen, but we shall get started. So, of course, and thank you all also for the many participants that we have today. It's obviously a topic that is of interest in a, we can say, in a transversal fashion. And I'm very glad to have here Andrew Duff and the other 2 MEPs that worked very hard for this idea of having a union-wide constituency in the European Union, in the European electoral system. And there are 3 main reasons why we are proposing this in this new proposal for a European electoral law that has many elements that I'm not going now to go into detail regarding also more common standards on voting age, voting day, and so on. I want to concentrate today on the question of the union-wide constituency. And this is not, let's say, yet another attempt of kind of paroxysm, but it's an effort to have a more a stronger, more authentic, in a way, European transnational democracy. So this is not a technicality of constitutional lawyers, what we're proposing here, but something that we believe it can really make a difference in the way we conduct the elections to European Parliament and also in the overall political system of the European Union. There are at least 3 gaps that we have identified in the current system that we think we can solve with this proposal. The first one, of course, this is very well known, I think, for almost everyone that is interested in this topic, is that we still have, by and large, 27 national elections at the time of the European elections. Of course, this has different causes. I'm not going to get into that. We don't really have transnational European media or a transnational public opinion comparable to the dynamics we observe at the level of the member states. We don't have civics education at the level of the European Union. So there are a number of reasons. I'm not getting into that. But the reality is that these elections to the European Parliament are still very much dominated by domestic issues, by how much strength does the government, the party in government have at the moment of the European elections, how much strength has the opposition in a given member state. So we really don't have, even if we have made some progress, I will say in the last election, clearly there was a lot of discussion across the Union on climate change, I will say, at the time of the European elections, but still we don't really have this true, transnational debate, transnational campaign, and transnational dynamic during the European elections. Then the second gap that I think is also very clear to all objective observers is the almost total lack of visibility of European political parties. Of course, it's many years now that we have them. National parties are affiliated to them. But once again, when we go to the European elections, you almost never see the logo or the party name in any in any sign during the campaign. You don't find it in the posters. You don't find it in the billboards. Only national party symbols by and large are used. You don't see them, of course, in the electoral ballots whenever the system is using party lists, which is not always the case. But even if it's a system of individual candidates running, you will not see the EPP logo or the Sandy logo or the ALDE logo or the Green logo attached to this particular list or candidate. So this means that for all matters, the European voters are not able to identify the existence of European political parties, their programs, their manifestos, and their candidates. And the third gap is connected with the Spitzenkandidaten process or head of the list process. As you know, and Andrew knows that very well because he played a very fundamental role in making that principle come about, means that these European political parties also have candidates for president of the European Commission. But once again, who is aware of that? Well, probably people like her attending this meeting, but not really, I will say, the average voter across the Union. In part because of the two previous gaps that I mentioned, but also because this candidate for president of the Commission is not really heading or being at the top of a European list. He or she is a candidate, is a Spitzenkandidat or a top of the list or head of the list in a member state, right? Franz Timmermans ran in the Netherlands, Manfred Weber ran in Germany, and of course, in their home states, they were well known, and probably the majority or a good part of the electorate was aware that they were running for president of the Commission. But this was not the case, I will say, in the majority of all the other member states, maybe with some exceptions. Franz Timmermans speaks German. He maybe did a lot of campaigning in Germany, and he may be maybe a bit of a difference there. But certainly, if we talk, for instance, my own country, Spain, well, it's totally unrealistic to claim that those that voted PSOE or Partido Popular were aware that in a way they were also supporting Timmermans or Weber for president of the Commission. Of course, this dynamic at the level of member states works. Of course, in Spain, the party leader, or in Spain or in every, I will say every member state, the party leader runs in a given district. There is no need for a national district. And everybody understands that he's not only running to be a parliamentarian representing a given district, he's also running for the job of prime minister. And everyone knows that even if you don't vote formally for that person because you don't live in that same district, you are supporting that party leader with your vote in any other district for that person for prime minister. But of course, this dynamic doesn't work that way in Europe. So this is why it's very clear that if we have this pan-European list that are headed by each political European political party leader or candidate to president of the Commission, now you can, in a way, I will say cover by and large these three gaps that I mentioned. First, you have a list composed by candidates that come from the entire union. So these people are going to campaign not only in their member state, but across the union. And therefore, if you campaign in another member state, you are going to talk normally of transnational topics. You are not going to engage in the domestic political debate. This creates a very new dynamic. Second, of course, visibility of European political parties, because you will have this campaign for the union-wide constituency, and there obviously all the electoral merchandising, media, advertisement logically will carry the names and logos of these European political parties. And then third achievement, I will say, you make very clear the process of candidates for president of the Commission, because you will have another ballot with the head of the list who is heading a European list and making clear to the electorate that this person is running for president of the European Commission. So this is why this proposal, it seems very functional in order to achieve these three things: making the campaign for the European Parliament, the electoral campaign, transnational, visibility of European political parties, and visibility of a Spitzenkandidaten or process of, head of the list. Now, fourth element, and with this I conclude, we have an advantage also, that is that we don't need to change the treaty to do this, because we have, as you know, the seats that are left over from Brexit. So we can have this second union-wide constituency composed of as much as 46 members. And what we need to ensure, of course, and I think this is the main objection that we have heard traditionally in the past, we have to ensure that this pan-European list is balanced in its, its population balance, right? That you don't have only candidates coming from the most populated member states at the top of the list. And this is something that we are attempting to solve with our proposal. I will not get into the details now, but the project is public. So we have grouped the member states in 5 groups with roughly the same number of member states per group in accordance to their population, precisely to ensure that you need to represent, you need to include candidates coming from each of these 5 groups in the first 14 posts or slots of this list, precisely to go against this concern that is a real concern. Maybe if needed, we can go into more detail in that later when we have time for questions, but certainly we have a solution, I think, a fair solution to ensure that we have a balanced list, and that the list is not just transnational, but is multinational. It really reflects, the diversity of our union, and everyone has a fair chance to be in the electable positions. So I'll leave it here. I think this is, the main aims of the project, and of course, we are working hard inside the Parliament in order to have all the main pro-European political families, including EPP, part of this political agreement, so we can eventually have this reform in place, which I think it's very important for the elections of 2024. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Domenic, for this fantastic overview of the topic, for naming the 3 current problems that we have. But thank you even more for giving us solutions. I have the pleasure now to give the floor to Mr. Sandro Bozzi. He's the president of the Union of European Federalists. He's also a member of the European Parliament in the Renew Group and the Secretary General of the European Democratic Party. Mr. Gozzi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alejandra, and thank you, Dominic. This is certainly, I see in the chat that Jolaine just written what I wanted to start with. I mean, first of all, congratulations for the excellent work which Dominic is doing as a rapporteur, as draftsman in the European Parliament, and also this is a very federalist battle. And I want to emphasize that this time, the Union of European Federalists is strongly behind this initiative, and is strongly committed to move ahead and to have a successful result. And this is very important because we are active in different fields. And we are active, of course, in the European Parliament. As Alejandra just mentioned, I'm a member of Renew Group, and I'm strongly committed in the Constitutional Affairs Committee with Dominic to defend these proposals and to ensure that this time we manage. It's going to be difficult, but possible. We managed to gather a majority in the European Parliament in favor of this proposal. There are other members who are very, very active, of course, in the Constitutional Affairs Committee, starting with from Guy Verhofstadt. We are very active as a Union of European Federalists in the conference on the future of Union itself. First of all, because we managed to become formal member of the conference. The UEF some of you might know, is formally part of the process, together with the European movement, and is certainly we are represented by our Secretary General Anna Eshterov, and this is also something which is a reason for us of satisfaction, but also of bigger responsibility, because this time we are not only informed and engaged observers, we are engaged actors. It is clear that, I mean, everything won't depend on us, but we have to make our part. And this is something very important. And there again, in the conference, we are active. Dominic, myself, and other members of the Spinelli Group are in the working group on democracy. We have organized the work of the conference among different working groups, and there is a working group on democracy in which we will discuss also the issue, of course, of the electoral law, or in any case, the issue of how to improve, to enhance democracy in Europe. And if you look at the first report of the citizens panels, and also at the first proposals on the citizen platform, the online platform, you see that the issue of European federalization and the issue of transnational movement and parties and strengthening European politics together with democracy are among the main issues so far, which are emerging so far from the citizens' request and participation. And this is very important. And this is very important. I'm pleased of this. I'm a little bit surprised because I thought that it was mainly an issue for very committed European and federalists. In fact, when citizens start to discuss about democracy, realize something, which is the real reason why we are promoting this battle. And the real reason that there is a big gap, a huge gap in Europe, where we have a democratic exercise, where we have a European Parliament. I'm talking to you from the European Parliament. Andrew, Joe, I mean, knows very well this building. Every 5 years, we exercise a right for which we are privileged and spoiled as citizens in the world, because we are the only citizen that elect a continental parliament. We are not the only regional organization. You got NAFTA, you got Mercosur, you got the African Unity, you got many Asian cooperation. There are parliamentary assemblies. There is a parliamentary assembly of the African Union. We are the only one who directly elect, since 1979, women and men who are there to represent the citizens. But we haven't worked on we haven't done the rest. We haven't done the rest because, as Dominic recalled, we have 27 national debates and not one real European debate, because one of the national stronghold is politics, where we have a single market, where we have a single currency, where we have a European economy. We don't have a European politics, which is absurd if you think. It's exactly what we are missing. And we are missing European politics for many reasons, but also because we don't have the possibility of directly voting European political parties and movements, and because we haven't introduced fundamental change in the electoral law, starting on the convergence of the electoral system, starting from the use of the logo, starting from the commitment to give more visibility to the European political actors, all the things that Dominic told you. But the key issues is that until when the citizens won't be allowed to directly vote European political parties, these European political parties will remain non-identifying political objects floating around the Brussels arena, but which won't have any visibility and therefore any real legitimacy in the eyes of the citizens. And this is what is missing, because the fact that we don't have real European political actor together with democratically elected member of the European Parliament is one of the reasons of the weaknesses of European democracy. And after all, and this is what will be my last consideration, and then a conclusive message. And after all, this is exactly what has happened in any constitutional or construction. I mean, when we have introduced, for example, in Spain with the autonomous community, and before in Italy with the regions, when we have introduced the region, when we have decided to directly elect the member of the regional assembly, we have started to develop a regional dimension of politics. And sometimes, and in Germany the same, sometimes even the political alliance at regional or Länder level are different from the alliance at national level. And the same it is in Italy, and the same it is in Spain. What I mean that once that we have introduced a democratic level of competition, we have also developed a dimension of a specific dimension of politics. We haven't done so far at the European level. And this is the strong political reason, in my view, for which we have also to seize the opportunity of the conference to move ahead with the transnational list and to move ahead with all the other modification about which improvement of the electoral law, and therefore of the electoral democratic participation about which Dominic was talking. My last, in conclusion, only a warning. A warning that on one side in the parliament, some colleagues of ours are telling us, don't go too fast, slow down, let's listen to the citizens, let's see what is coming up from the conference. And I'm very sensitive to this request, even if I was elected not out of the blue in 2019, but there were citizens who elected me, and they elected Dominic with a program where we wanted to introduce the transnational list. So, I mean, it's not that we need additional legitimacy, but certainly it makes sense to use also the outcome of the conference to have more strength. But, I mean, on one side, there are some colleagues in the parliament say, wait. On the other side, when you go to talk to government in the council, they will tell you, if you wait too long, we won't have time to ratify, and we won't be ready in 2024. I say to Domenech, and I say to you all, and I say to myself, let's pay attention. Let's pay attention behind very good and healthy reason. I hope that there isn't a strategy, organized strategy, in order not to be ready by 2024. This is only my warning. And I think that it is a warning about which we have to be aware. If my worries are not founded, I will be the first to be glad of this. But I say to Domenech and to us all, let's be aware and let's try to find the right timing between the necessity and the will of using the conference and the need to be ready in order to give enough time to the national ratification process to ratify the modification of the electoral law in order to be ready for the European election in 2024. Thank you very much, Alejandra.
Thank you, Sandro, and thank you for bringing into the discussion today your very straightforward ideas and for sharing with us your own experience as an MEP, let's say, almost transnational MEP. Thank you for that. And now I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Diaz-Grego, as she's currently working as policy analyst in the European Parliamentary Research Services, where she develops her research in the area of institutional and constitutional affairs. She's also professor of constitutional law at the University of Alcalá in Spain, and she has been visiting fellow at several other universities and research institutes, among which Harvard Law School and the Max Planck Institute for Comparative Public Law and International Law. She also holds a PhD in law from the University the Complutense of Madrid, conducting part of her doctoral research at the European University Institute in Florence. So, Mrs. Diaz-Grego, the floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much, Alejandra. And of course, thank you very much to Domenech and to the Union of European Federalists for the invitation to participate in this debate. It is a pleasure for me to be here and to have the opportunity to discuss with you this very innovative proposal to create a pan-European constituency. In fact, we have already discussed about the content of this proposal and the goals it pursues with Mr. Domenech and Sandro Gozzi. So I would like to propose you in the few minutes that I have with you to look at the possible impacts of this proposal. We all know that electoral systems are not neutral. They never translate votes into seats in a neutral way. And we also know that electoral systems shape the political system of the entity in which they are applied. So when I was invited to participate in this event, I considered that, and I decided to make some numbers looking at the possible impacts of this proposal. I took the results of the latest European elections, and I tried to imagine how good Parliament would look like if this proposal had been enforced in 2019. And I would like to share, in fact, the results of my calculations with you. Hopefully you can see already the presentation that I've made for you. You see it? Yes. Okay, so let's look at the numbers, because I think numbers are important, as I was saying, to assess the content of an electoral reform. And in fact, if we look at the numbers, the first thing we will think about, of course, is, okay, will this proposal change the political composition of Parliament? I have no time to explain in detail all my calculations, but of course I will show you the results. And then if you want, in the question and answer session, I can go into the details of the calculation. So first, would there be a change in the political balance in Parliament? We know, because Domenech already explained it, that we will have another constituency, the pan-European constituency, with 46 seats more, and those could be proportionally distributed among all the different European political parties. And as a result of that, you can see on the slide, there would be some changes in the political composition of the European Parliament. But in fact, the changes, you can see the percentages are really, really small. And what is more important, the three European political parties, the three biggest European political parties, so the EPP, the Socialists and ALDE, could still ensure under this proposal a large majority in Parliament. So under the proposal, we would see no major changes from the point of view of the composition of Parliament. But we can think about another possible impact. Dominic already commented it. Would we see a change in the number of members coming from big member states compared to the numbers that we have now? In fact, from a legal point of view, we all know that this shouldn't be a problem because the members of parliament do not represent their member states. They do represent all the EU citizens, all of them. But we also know that this was a problem under previous proposals to create a pan-European constituency because small and medium-sized member states thought that they would somehow lose representation. Okay, as a result of the very strict requirements that are in this proposal and that Domenic already explained, what we will see is just the opposite. In fact, we will see an increase in the number of members coming from big member states, which are in group A, and we will see a decrease, sorry, it's just the other way around. We will see a decrease, I am really sorry, a decrease in the number of members coming from the 5 big member states, and we see this in group A, okay? And we will see an increase, okay, in the number of members coming from small and medium-sized member states. And we see these in groups B to E. So it will happen just the opposite. As I am saying, we will have more members coming from small and medium-sized member states with this proposal. And we may want to look at another possible impact. Domenic already commented that this proposal also includes a SIPO system. So there is an obligation to have an alternation of women and men in the electoral list. And as a result of this obligation, we may think, okay, well, we have a more feminine European Parliament. We will have more women elected. Yeah. Indeed, that could be the case. Now we have more or less nearly 39% of women elected in the European Parliament. But under this proposal, we will not attain the 50% representation of women that a SIPO system usually seeks to attain. We would not do that because in order to work, a SIPO system needs big constituencies and close electoral lists, and we would not have that in all the constituencies that we will use under this proposal for European elections. But even if we will not attain, it's nearly impossible to attain this 50% representation of women and men, we would go up a little bit, and we will see a slight increase in the number of women members of the European Parliament. So yes, we will see some changes in the composition of Parliament as a result of this proposal. But as you have seen, the percentages, the changes, the real changes are really, really small. We are just talking about a couple of points in the percentage. So there would be no major changes in the composition of the European Parliament under this proposal. But when I saw this, I wondered if this was a problem. And I understood that, in fact, this is not. Because as Domenic, as the rapporteur has already explained, in fact, this proposal does not seek to modify the composition of Parliament. It seeks to enhance the European dimension of the elections. So the question is if we will see that, if we will have a more European electoral process. And indeed, I think this is very hard to predict. But I could say that we will have more possibilities of seeing this happening if we take into account several elements. First, and Dominic already explained this, we need strong European political actors. And here I am talking mainly about political parties. Electoral campaigns are run by political actors. So if they are not strong, we will see no electoral campaign. So this proposal needs to be linked to another one that is going to arrive to Parliament, which is the one of the regulation on the statute and funding of the European political parties. Second element we need to look at is we need to give means to those European political actors to truly develop a European political campaign. And for this, I think that we need to have uniform electoral rules that would apply all over Europe, and that we need to give them resources, including financial resources. Some of these elements are already in this proposal, and we can maybe comment them later. And third, if I may, we should put in front of European political actors a really big carrot, meaning the number of seats they can gain in this pan-European constituency. European political actors will not invest money and time in a European campaign if they know that they will only win a few seats in the pan-European constituency. So we really need to keep this in mind when thinking about the size of the pan-European constituency. So just to sum up very quickly, I've shown with the numbers that this proposal would not introduce major changes in the composition of Parliament. But it may, of course, introduce some changes in the European political system, in the political system of the European Union, if it strengthens European political actors and it really encourages them to publicly discuss about Europe. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Maria, for your fantastic and enlightening presentation and for your academic perspective. I think we are all used to reading these papers, but it's always a pleasure, to have the authors explaining the content. So I'd like to give the floor now to Mr. Andrew Duff. He's a Liberal Democrat politician. He's also the former president of the Union of European Federalists and former president of the Spinelli Group in the European Parliament, and member of the European Parliament for the East of England region of the UK. During the 7th term in 2011 and 2012, he was in charge in the AFCO committee on the report on the reform of the electoral law. Mr. Duff, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be able to speak in this group to old friends as well as to people I don't know yet. I'm extremely pleased that the project, the great cause, is proceeding, but I must say that I'm a bit concerned that the progress is not quick, and I fear that it's improbable that the complete complex of legislative changes is to be in place in time for 24. I think it's crucial that the French presidency of the Council, which begins in January, is going to be in charge, as it were, of the trialogue between the institutions to make progress. And if the French can't crack this, then I'm afraid the chances are extremely remote. Secondly, if I can be a bit critical of the draft as it is from Dominic, I've explained this to him before, so it won't become as a surprise to him, that I think we've got to simplify and clarify the proposal substantially. For instance, I think that the reader that is not engrossed in this issue ought to be told simply about the voting process. That is to say that the citizen will have 2 votes. The ordinary one that he has for his regional or national member of the European Parliament, plus an extra one. This is a prize of, this is a federal prize, if you like, of the deepening polity. I think that will attract the popular support for the proposal that is inherently quite complicated. So thirdly, can we produce an explanation of the process that is not so complicated? And here I think that there's too much stress in the proposal, and I think Maria has brought this out a bit, too much stress on the balance between countries. That's not the point. The point is, can parties emerge from this change to the electoral process? I think they can, of course, as I think we all do here. But I think that the emphasis on balance of power between big states and small states is a mistake. There are plenty of people in the parliament, like Paolo Rangel, who will climb on the issue of balance of power to kill off the whole proposal. So push the emphasis, change the narrative from countries to parties. I also think it's not necessary to define or to try to categorize what is a European political party. The truth is that we haven't, as yet, created a truly federal political party. What we have are confederations of national political parties, and the whole purpose of introducing transnational lists is to transcend that present and inadequate structure of political parties. The draft becomes very bogged down in trying to define this quite uninteresting issue, and it's legally isn't very important about what is a political party. And then the Spitzenkandidat. Now, I think it's a mistake to put too much emphasis on the fact that some of us would like the champions of the transnational lists to become the candidate for the president of the Commission. In principle, I think it's a very good idea. In practice, however, if you push the idea in the Council, you'll be killing off the complete proposal. It is, at present, the treaty says something else. And if the Council finds or fears that the principal motive of transnational lists is to promote the, I think we ought to be honest, the failed Spitzenkandidat process that we've had in the recent past, then they will kill it off. The Article 17.7 of the treaty is clear on this. You can include it in the explanations, but the idea that the champions of the transnational lists can all become the president of the Commission is clearly far from the case. There's a perfectly sensible, strong argument for transnational lists without the direct connection to the Spitzencandidate thing. Finally, in Article 12 of the draft regulation, which speaks of the elections to the parliament being free and secret, I think we ought to insert the word fair. That elections nowadays must be free, fair, and secret. I think that's a great challenge to Mr. Orban and his friends, which will pick up support in the Council and indeed in the Commission for this great proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duff, for bringing into the discussion more federalist components. I think our participants, will be willing to ask you more questions, because I've seen that in the chat there are already some questions. I will give the floor now to Mr. Joe Leinen. He was between 1999 and 2019 a member of the European Parliament. He took part in the Convention for the elaboration of a Charter of Fundamental Rights for the EU. From 2004 to 2019, he was president of the Constitutional Affairs Committee, the AFCO committee. And from 2019 to 2011, he chaired the Committee on the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety. He has been the co-rapporteur beside Danuta Hübner, MEP Danuta Hübner, of the AFCO proposal on the reform of the European Electoral Law in 2015. Mr. Leinen, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good morning. Very happy to be with all of you. I'm actually in the Europa Institute of the University of Saarland, the region where I come from. And later on, we have a session here on the university. So that fits very well with what we debate in this event. Now, I think that achieving truly European elections is one of the fundamental battles that federalists have to do and continue to do. And I'm therefore as well happy that AFCO took the initiative to try to really get better results than Danuta Hübner and me could achieve in the last legislative period. Now, we have to fight for European democracy. And I know that this is already difficult for many people to understand. What is European democracy? I have seen in the parliament that all the nationalists, all the Eurosceptics, they are against achieving European democracy. They even think democracy is only possible on a national level. It would not be possible on the European level. And that's the big contradiction between federalists and non-federalists. We believe that it is possible to have really transnational democracy. And therefore, I think the infrastructure is to have transnational political parties, to have transnational political elections, and to have transnational personalities that later on are executing, let's say, the political power on the EU level. Now, Dominic has a really good draft report. I congratulated him already in the chat. I think that's very courageous. I know that in the process through the parliament and later with the council, there are always, let's say, elements to water down the one or the other point. But the start, Dominic, is really good. And I think that in the parliament, we have not the battle between left and right, the usual political battle. We have now, again, on this crucial moment, a battle between pro-Europeans and Eurosceptics and anti-Europeans. And therefore, I would welcome that you collect friends from all groups in the parliament, all democratic friends, to form a majority. Like Sandro was elaborating what is early and what is late, My experience is you cannot come with such a proposal too late in the legislature. The nearer you go to the elections, the more it will be difficult. And therefore, we have already half time on Christmas at the end of the year. I think this proposal should pass the parliament at the latest in spring next year in order to give it to the council and then the whole ratification process. Now, I looked in the proposal and I know, Dominic, that you had to do it for the Rangels in the parliament to have these thresholds on representation, geographic, demographic, and gender, and that divided through 46 seats. I mean, that will be a very hard task at the end. But these are details. We should not focus our spotlight on this. This will clarify. This is details. The main point is to get these 46 seats. And the opportunity was never so good than now with the Brexit seats. We would not get it with Britain in to, let's say, divide again national seats and some countries would lose seats. Now is the historic opportunity, and I wish you all the best that this is having success. Now, I just focus only on one point that was not mentioned. To my big frustration, in 2019, the Spitzenkandidaten model got a big accident. This was a nuclear accident, that you had Spitzenkandidaten, but Madame von der Leyen got to be Commission President. And we saw what is lacking in all the elements the day after arrangements. So Sunday evening, 9 o'clock in the evening, we get the results. We know who is in front and what coalitions could be done in the parliament to form a majority. And we have to have arrangements for the day after. And Dominic was fixing this in his proposal, that you need an interinstitutional agreement between Parliament and European Council on what happens the day after. So the consultations that are in the treaty, but are not really described how that happens. And I think as well, Dominic is proposing that the group leaders in the Parliament, this will still be the old ones, and the presidents of the European political parties should come together on the Monday morning and see what are possible political coalitions that have a majority. And then make this as a joint proposal to the Council. Because I respect Andrew's point that it is legally the right of the Council to propose a candidate. But this is a political battle, Andrew, and I would nevertheless favor that the top candidates of the European lists, what would be the alternative? I mean, you have European political parties who have a party congress who make a European-wide constituency and a list, and then the top person would be something secondary or third class. That cannot be. The top candidates must be the candidates aspiring the Commission President position later. And that is a political battle. And if you join forces, I think with the Council, European Council, that should be possible. And then my last point, indeed, if you have a political majority by more than one political group, because nobody will have absolute majority, it would be good to have that legislative agreement that Dominic was mentioning. I think such a coalition should work on major points together. We might not be there where we are on a national level. You see that now in Germany, we look for a legislative agreement between 3 parties, first time in our history. But it will be done. But in European Parliament, you could have elements of legislative agreement for the whole 5 years and stabilize the Commission President that you have elected in a way. Yeah, that would be my points. I think Federalists and UAF and European Movement, Young European Federalists, all the others should really stick together the next months to bring this proposal through the parliament and then make the battle in the conference of the future of Europe. Sandro, you're totally right. I mean, this is one of our hit lists and one of the priorities for us of this conference and the day after of the conference. And I hope that Emmanuel Macron, who gave a big push to this idea, has it on his agenda. And I think you, Sandro, will take care that he is not forgetting what he has promised in 2017. Okay, all the best. I told Dominic that I have now to go to my university meeting. It starts exactly, has started 2 minutes before. I'm with you and see you next time. Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye, Mr. Leinen. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for your intervention and for your call to action, which we share at the Union of European Federalists, of course, as you know. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to MEP and Professor Danuta Hübner. She is a member of the European Parliament since 2009 and EPP spokesperson in the Committee on Constitutional Affairs, in the AFCO committee. She was, as I said before, rapporteur with Joe Leinen on the reform of the electoral law in 2015. And among other responsibilities in the past, between 2004 to 2019, she has been EU Commissioner for Regional Policy and former Minister for European Affairs in 2003 and 2004 in the Polish government. So, Mrs. Hübner, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope I am unmuted. I first of all apologize. I just connected with you. I apologize. I've been on webinars since 7:30, and the last one they had horrible problems with technology and okay, whatever. But I am here now, and of course I know that you had a good discussion, so I don't want to repeat things that you have already probably said. I was just thinking that the difference between now and when we were with Jolaine and trying to push through this horrible extra special legislative procedure, the new electoral law, push through the whole system, I think the Conference on the Future of Europe did not exist. And I'm just mentioning it in the sense that we didn't have in the European Parliament, because that was mostly between the Parliament and the Council, this procedure, we didn't have really a machinery, we continue not to have, that would allow us also to have those public consultations in a way that would really include those who are affected. I hate to use the word stakeholder, but really just to talk to the committed Europeans who want to participate in elections of the representatives that just had a major say on Europe, on the changes in Europe. So we spent a lot of time with Jo on consulting the political groups, the parliament, where, you know, on some issues it was relatively easy, but there was a long list also of issues where it was very difficult also to find agreement. We spent a lot of, I don't want to say wasted, but we spent a lot of time on consultation with the member states at different level and with national parliaments, which was the most painful, I must say, consultation process, because at that time, I think between the national parliaments and the European Parliament, the relationship was just having a bigger element of competition rather than cooperation. And in the sort of most committed to democracy member states, we could hear very negative opinions from national parliaments regarding the right of European Parliament to have its own electoral system and electoral law. So we were alone with all those other institutions, and we didn't have citizens behind us. And that's, I think, the privilege of Dominic and privilege of those of us who would like to see the new electoral law with all the elements that would contribute to closer Europe, ever closer Europe, that we have now the potential of Conference on the Future of Europe that can bring, I think, a real change. Because the problems, I think, continue to be more or less the same in terms of you might, I don't know if you all explained that we finally just, we lack the ratification of 3 member states to have the previous proposal enter into effect. That's how this unanimity and ratifications work. And that shows also how inefficient can be our system when we want to bring the change to people's rights, and we cannot just get it because there is always 1 or 2 member states that would not ratify, and we need unanimity. And now I think it might be even more difficult if you take into account what's going on in some member states when it comes to understanding of democracy and the importance of European integration and the rule of law. So what I want to say is that we have to use this process of conference on the future of Europe. I agree with the final statement by Jo, which I heard. I also think that most of the issues that we put with Jo years ago into the proposal of the new electoral law, I think Dominic and colleagues, shadows, I think they have them there. There was maybe some small differences. And so we have a law which is not substituting the national systems. We have a proposal that is actually introducing certain principles that would be shared by all member states and all the sort of framework within member states. Maybe some will have to be adjusted, but not necessarily, not everywhere. So we are having this modest approach. We don't have a proposal of legislation that would introduce a purely European system without paying attention to the traditions, culture, political cultures as well. But there is a certain minimum of principles that would make people who are voting feel that they have the same rights, and then they are all on equal footing, and that they know what is the importance of European parties and what is the link with national parties, and that also this emotional thing, which is having the elections more or less together and feeling that there is a process going through Europe, is something which is important, which I think is perfect in Dominic's proposal. What I also think is important now compared to what it was 5-6 years ago, is that my understanding of what's going on in Europe, when I look at the recent elections to the European Parliament, is that we have European demos gradually emerging from below, and this is a major issue for the electoral law and for some solutions which are in the proposal of Dominic and colleagues. I think it is really, we could see in the last elections that across Europe, without really talking to each other, people were raising the same issues, the issue of value, the climate, which dominated, I think, the elections across the member states. So I think there is a gradual sort of emergence of something that is European demos, and that is, I think, additional justification for having electoral law that would represent really the will or the approach to the elections of citizens. So that's what I can say. I can also confirm that there are, especially on those issues which were very difficult last time around and which are also difficult now, there is no yet, I think, consensus on this, are the transnational lists, of course, and then the combination with the Spitzenkandidaten or lead candidate system. I think we just have to probably understand those who are worrying, who are thinking that the system would really introduce a sort of lack of level playing field, if I can say it this way, even though it's not about level playing field, but equal rights or equal position of the mid-sized countries or small countries and big countries. So any system would have to take this into account, definitely. I also think that other concerns which colleagues are raising is that just kind of unequal status of the parliamentarians elected through national elections processes or through this transnational list. And I think that the discussion should focus really on those things which are dividing, tearing us apart, I would say, across European community, that we have to focus on if we really want to achieve, to be successful this time and around. And also, I think, try to make the system as simple as possible for ordinary citizens, in ordinary in the sense that not really spending nights and days on reading the treaties and trying to understand the language and also the complicated system. So we just have to pay attention to those small things that are using by those who are against the transnational list as important for them arguments. So I would just would like to encourage all of us to just take up this discussion and try to find a joint approach, hoping that citizens will be with us in this discussion, and so that we can avoid deadlock in Parliament and deadlock in the Council. But we have also to draw. It's a good example of that we should draw a lesson also on the unanimity, how it can block decision making and block the changes that could benefit, I think, Europe, which is our home and which has to stay important and faithful to its values also for the future. So we just have to have a system that is allowing us to find agreement, not because we are voting, but to find agreement because we are convinced that we are having a joint good conclusion to the debate. And that would be my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hubner. I think even if you were late, you managed to bring excellent elements to the discussion, to feed the discussion today. Before we go to questions and answers, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Ruiz de Besa.
Thank you, Alejandra, to all the presenters. Just a quick reaction. Andrew Duff mentioned the question of the need for simplicity, and this is a point well taken. When we wrote the proposal in legalese, of course, I think it was a bit unavoidable to be more complex than that is possible to grasp for a non-expert reader. But this is why we have also incorporated in the last version of the draft report, and also at the time you, Andrew, yourself made this very important comment that we have a practical example incorporated as an annex to make it very clear how it works. Then several of you mentioned the question of the timeline, and of course I will have loved to be able to have started the work in AFCO in July on this proposal, but of course we have also and it's a bit of a trade-off that we need to strike the balance. We have the conference on the future of Europe, and it will have been politically very difficult to say, even if formally this is correct, of course, Parliament has initiative, and I mean, we're going ahead no matter what. Since even the President of the Commission at the time mentioned that both Spitzenkandidaten and transnational lists will have have to be debated at the conference on the future of Europe. So this is why we're trying to move in a way hand in hand, but it is true that the timeline is pressing, and Joe mentioned, well, this has to be voted no later than spring next year in plenary, and this is exactly what we are aiming for. Also taking into account, and Danuta also mentioned this, that we don't have yet a political agreement by the four main pro-European political groups. I mean, we have clear stance, I would say, from S&D, Renew, and Greens, but there is still an ongoing process within the EPP to see what what they want to do. To be clear on this. Now, the question of population balance, yes, maybe, Andrew, you're right, we have overemphasized that vis-a-vis the transnationalization of political parties. but it's only because, as you know, this has been one of the main traditional objections to a union-wide system. Funny enough, and you may be even more right than you thought. Funny enough, when you go to talk to people that have always mentioned this question, it's, I think, as Maria has shown in the presentation, undeniable that this proposal doesn't go against candidates from medium and small member states. More to the contrary, and maybe later, if you have time, maybe you can explain that table a bit better. Then after you told to them, they still remain against the proposal. So maybe they were not really sincere, no, when they were saying this is a plot against small and medium member states. Okay. Then, Andrew, thank you very much. Very good idea. I think you're right. We should say not only free, but also fair elections. This is a more general comment. It goes beyond the question of union-wide, of course. Constituency. And then there is the point of the link with the Spitzenkandidaten. And I know that you have a reservation on making this link too explicit. We have to bear in mind that in the proposal, this is by no means a legal obligation. So nowhere in the proposal you will find, in the legal proposal, I mean, any obligation for political parties to, nominate as president of the commission their #1 in the transnational list. This person can also be, aiming to be group leader after the election, for instance. So there is no obligation. But my impression is that probably the main pro-European political parties will make such a link. And I don't think this is a bad idea in itself. Will this give the impression to European Council that we're trying to take away their power to nominate a candidate for president of the Commission? Well, it is true that this is already let's say a non-unlimited power, no? When the Lisbon Treaty says that the outcome of the election has to be taken into account, no? So, of course, this means that this is a silly example, that the European Council could not possibly propose Beyoncé for president of the European Commission, no? So there is already it's a dialogic process, right? Having said that, again, the proposal does not, it couldn't say it because that would be kind of trying to change the treaty through the back door. Doesn't change the, I will say, overall dynamic, which is that in the end, it's the European Council who has to assess who has the best chance of having a majority after the election in the European Parliament. And it is not, I will say, mandatory or guaranteed that the winner in the European-wide constituency is the person that can assemble a majority after the election, right? So I think this has to be clear. So maybe this is what I can. Sandro, I don't know. I thought Sandro was not still with us. Sorry, if you are still with us. Sorry, Sandro. Yes. I thought I didn't see you in the screen, and I thought you couldn't stay for the duration. No, well, I agree with everything you said. And you also referred to the question of the timeline, and of course the question to the Spitzen, and I think this is how we can have I think a middle ground in this sense, no, between those who could say, okay, it has nothing to do one thing with the other, and those that think it has to be kind of or almost a legal obligation. So if you don't mind, why not we give maybe just a couple of minutes or 3 minutes, because those questions also came up in the chat, to Maria to maybe explain where she's getting the numbers on the table, no, and then the second table, and then for the other speakers, Sandro and Andrew and Danuta, if you are still with us, then you can also reply to questions from the audience.
Thank you very much, Dominic. I don't know if I can share again one figure, because I think we will see these questions. In fact, there are two questions. So how I allocated the 46 seats of the European of the new pan-European constituency, and what was the impact of this grouping of member states. So if I can quickly share my presentation again, because I had to suppress some elements. I really did not have the time to explain it in the 5 minutes that I was supposed to talk about So I just deleted it. But I think this may help us to really understand what I was talking about. So my assumptions for the allocation of the seats of these 46 seats of the pan-European constituency were the following. I took the result of the latest European elections, okay, and the affiliation to European political parties as it was in March 2021, because those are the latest, let's say, official data that we have coming from the authority of European political parties. Okay, and I just applied to that data, let's say, the Dawn formula, which is a very simple one, and applying the Dawn formula, this is what you get as a result. One very important point that I want to make, you see that I'm taking into account European political parties, not the political groups in parliament, because it is European political parties together with movements, okay, and coalitions who can really present a candidature for European elections, okay? So first point, very important one. Second, very important one, I'm not taking into account here, because I cannot. I don't have a magic ball to see the future, but I'm not taking into account here the possibility, which is under the proposal, it can happen, that national political parties create coalitions that can present a candidature, okay, for a pan-European constituency. If that was the case, these results could change, obviously. But with the data that we have now, those could be the results, okay? So the EPP could get 13 more seats, the Socialists, as you can see, 11, if I'm reading well, ID 5, etc., etc. Okay. Then what happens with demographic representation, demographic balance? I don't know how you want to call it. Okay, as Dominic has already explained, okay, the proposal creates 5 different groups of member states depending on their population. So in the first group, in group A, we have the 5 big, the most populated member states, and so on and so forth. And the proposal requires in every bracket of 5, okay, of 5 individual candidates in every transnational list to have 1 individual candidate coming from each of these groups, okay? So very easy. For the EPP, okay, you have 13, yeah? You have 13 individual candidates that could be elected. You divide these in 5 brackets, and what do you get? You get that probably there would be 3 individual candidates coming from the first group. Yeah, is that right? For the second group, what would you do? What would you get? You could get again 3. Yeah, but for example, if you take it for ID could get 5 more seats. Okay, what would you get? You could get 1 seat more coming from each of the 5 groups that the proposal creates, and so on and so forth. So if we take all these numbers into account, the results is what you see here. I didn't have much time to explain it, and in fact I got confused and I said increase when it was decrease, okay? But the total results are the ones you see here, okay? And the point is that taking into account these calculations, okay, group A, so members coming from group A, which are the members coming from the 5 big member states, could decrease, and now I'm saying the thing correctly, decrease, whereas members coming from all the other member states, so small and medium-sized member states would increase. That's what the numbers, the data tell us. I don't know if it was a little bit more clear, Dominic. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I think it was. If someone else would like to speak, you can raise your hand and turn on your camera. Please, Mr. Duff.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd just like to add a point about turnout, which isn't spoken of, I think, in the report. I think that it would be a powerful thing to argue that transnational lists will be popular, especially with people who are disenchanted with their own national political parties. And the Council is concerned about the generally declining turnout of the Parliament, and it ought to be. And I think that it would strengthen Dominic's case in the trilogue. And this is my principal tactical issue, really, that Parliament plays its position very strongly and heavily in the trilogue to push the argument that turnout is an issue and that we are bringing a solution as opposed to a problem. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Duff. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Yes.
Yes, please, Mr.
Thank you, Alejandro. No, I mean, it was very, very interesting and in my view also useful. I don't know for Dominic, but certainly for me as member of AFCO, because there were also not only information, but some ideas about possible alternative solutions to the key problem that we have to address in order to gather a sufficient consensus in the European Parliament, and also arguments to plead politically on the public scene in favor of the transnational list. The point of the turnout which Andrew made is, my view, is excellent. I think it is absolutely like that. It is confirmed also, and we should use also, we got already a report on the first phase of the citizens' discussion in the conference. And I repeat, one of the demands of the citizens is to have a transnational polity, transnational movement. So it is clear that there is an expectation for a new political offer beyond borders. And this is something on which we should absolutely insist to get the consensus within and outside the EU institutions.
That's right.
I think it's an absolutely important point. Then there are two issues which are both political and also technical, and which has been evoked. The first is the issue of the link between the list and the head of the list candidate, the system of the Spitzenkandidaten, and the other one of the balance between the demographic balance between big countries and medium, smaller countries. I feel that, I mean, the issue of the formal link between the Spitzenkandidaten and the list, I'm in favor of that. It could be used in the Council to gather at least a minority which blocks the transnational list. So I would leave it legally open. I mean, each party is free to say that Mrs. White or Mr. Black is our number one in the list. And if we win the elections, we already told you that Mrs. White and Mr. Black will be president of the European Commission. I mean, but to put it formally and legally as binding could be used in the light of the contact and of the feeling that I have around the council, could be used as a good argument to get at least a blocking minority. So I would leave it as a political option, not as a legal obligation. And I think that also the discussion this morning, I mean, confirmed a little bit this, but the other is the issue of the balance, the demographic balance. It was one of the issues which myself I have raised first in the beginning of the new works of the Constitutional Affairs Committee in this term, because I remember when I was a member of the Italian government and I proposed the transnational list after Brexit in 2016. I remember that already in the first discussion in Bratislava, at the informal council in Bratislava in July 2016, was one of the issues that many colleagues around the table raised. It cannot be your proposal, dear Sandro, a way of having a couple of additional elected members from Germany or Italy or France. So, I mean, it is a real issue, and it was used also against the transnational list in the previous term. So we have to address it. But I think that we need also, we have to address it because it's a real issue. It is in contradiction with the spirit of the transnational list, but we know that it is an obstacle that we have overcome. In my view, the solution depends also on the number of members of the European Parliament that we will elect through the transnational list. Because the higher the number, the higher can be also the regional group, etc. But the lower is the number of members will be elected to the transnational list, the higher one must be the flexibility that we give to the European political parties to draft their list. I mean, if we elect 46 members is a thing. If we elect 27 members, another. If we elect 27 members, we cannot keep 5 regional groupings because it would be totally artificial, this list. And this list must be it must be politically meaningful and not an exercise of balance. And this is something that, in my view, we must address in the committee. Then we can see also, for example, I saw the proposal by Andrew as an alternative, I mean, as an alternative to regional groupings to introduce a rule that for each cohort of 10 candidates, you cannot be more than twice of the same nationality. I mean, we can keep in our pocket also alternative option. And I think that it also sounds, I mean, it sounds, Andrew, interesting, your proposal to me. But I think that, I mean, this is something on which we also have to reflect with an open mind and be ready to adjust, Dominic, I think, to adjust in the light of the different element of compromise.
Thanks, very good.
Thank you, Sandro. I think, yes, someone raised her hand, I think. Yeah, that's Ottilia Dant. Okay.
Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you. My name is Ottilia Dant. I'm a political risk forecaster for TENAO, so I'll ask a forecasting question. Dominic, if you were to put a probability on us having a European constituency by 2024, what would it be and what would increase and increase those probabilities in your opinion?
Maybe, thank you. Maybe we can collect a couple or 3 questions, unless there are no more.
No more raised hands, but yeah. Well, actually, there's one in the chat from Nicolas Espanoudakis. He asked, do you think it's possible to achieve unanimity in the Council about the pan-European constituency? And the other ones were addressed to Maria, so feel free to answer those questions. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you very much again, really, Andrew, Danuta, and Sandro, and of course, Maria and Joe before, because you're really making very good points, and all of them can actually be taken into account. And of course, this is being done in the context of a very good cooperation with my co-rapporteurs. I did not mention this at the beginning. Sven Simon from EPP, Damian Bosselager from the Greens, and Guy Verhofstadt from Renew. And I think we can have a consensus on many critical points on speech, and Sandro just mentioned it. It's wiser and more prudent not to try to make it legally binding. Let's allow the European political parties to to play it out. Then the questions from the colleagues from the audience go more to the feasibility, and I think that the real game changer, and of course Andrew and Danuta, I think, know very well what I'm about to say, and Sandro too. Sandro is also. I'm very glad that we have here, these colleagues that all played an important role in this process, and this proposal is just another step in this process that started in the late 90s, and I think we are increasing also the feasibility, not because of this particular proposal, but as Danuta mentioned, the time is different. We have the conference on the future of Europe. We have the European elections of 2009 that were disappointing to many in the way, von der Leyen was selected for president of the European Commission. So this is another, I think, important factor to be taken into account. We have the French presidency, which it was mentioned by Sandra, I think by Andrew as well, starting in January, who, as you know, the French president is very, 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 very committed to the idea of having a transnational constituency. So it's really a new political scenario. We are trying modestly with the proposal to address traditional concerns. One of them is the population balance, but also the link with the territory of a member elected eventually in a transnational constituency. So I think we are increasing the odds. I don't know by how much. And then what is also important, apart from these three political, I will say, new political conditions, is that we have also a good chance, I think, this time around to have EPP on board. This is not yet clear, or is not guaranteed, but we have a better chance of having EPP on board, which was not the case in the previous attempts. So if we are able in the plenary of in next spring, and we approve this with a solid majority that involves all four main pro-European political groups, Christian Democrats, Social Democrats, Liberals, and Greens, then I think we are also increasing the odds in the Council and in view of 2024.
Thank you, Dominic. We are actually not running out of time, but I mean, we're out of schedule. So if you really want to ask a question, that's the time now.
Yeah, I'm just reading the chat, but who's saying that Orban is going to win the election? I mean, you cannot take it for granted.
Nicolas, feel free to turn on your micro and speak if you want.
Orban will not be president for life, huh?
Dominic, I hope that you're right. But
we say in Spanish, there is no evil that lasts for 100 years.
Except in China.
So if there are no more